Now let's start with today's story. I never expected to hear something like that, especially not from Emma. We've been together for a few years, married for just 3 months, and as far as I knew, things were good. Normal, at least. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but nothing serious. I thought we were happy, but the other night changed everything. I wasn't snooping. I was just walking past our bedroom when I heard Emma talking on the phone. I didn't mean to listen in, but sometimes you catch pieces of a conversation whether you want to or not. Something about the way she spoke, low, serious, like she was venting, made me pause. Then I heard my name. Don't settle for just anyone. That's the mistake I made with Donald. My heart stopped. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, knocked breathless. My own wife, talking about me like that. He was my last resort, she continued, her voice heavy with regret. And now look where it's gotten me. I stood there, frozen. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My chest felt tight, my hands cold. Last resort. The words hit me like a hammer, ringing in my ears, impossible to shake. She had never said anything like this to me before. Never hinted at it. Had she always felt this way? Was I just too blind to see it? My first instinct was to storm in, to demand an explanation. I wanted to see her face, hear her try to explain herself. But I didn't. I don't know why. Maybe I was too stunned. Maybe I didn't want to hear more. Instead, I turned and walked away. For the rest of the night, I tried to act normal, but it was impossible. Every time I looked at her, I heard those words again in my head. Last resort. They were burned into my brain. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My mind kept replaying the conversation, over and over. Part of me wanted to believe there was some kind of misunderstanding, that maybe I had misheard her. But deep down, I knew what I heard. And there was no twisting it into something else. I never saw any signs of this before. Emma always seemed happy, or at least content. Sure, we had our occasional arguments, but who doesn't? There was never anything that made me think she felt trapped or like she had settled for me. It's not like she was forced into this marriage. We were together for a long time before tying the knot. We talked about our future, our goals, even kids someday. None of it ever felt fake or forced, at least not to me. As I lay there that night, my mind started spiraling. What if she's always felt this way and just never said anything? What if every moment we shared, every I love you, was just her going through the motions? I felt like a complete idiot, thinking back to all the times I thought we were happy, wondering if it was all just an act on her part. And then another thought hit me. What if there's someone else? I tried to push the idea away, but it clawed its way back. She said she settled for me. Who's to say there wasn't someone before me that she really wanted to be with? Someone she still thinks about? The thought made my stomach churn. I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole, but once the idea was in my head, it wouldn't leave. By morning, I was exhausted, physically, emotionally, completely drained. Emma woke up looking as cheerful as ever, stretching with a soft yawn before turning to me with a smile. "Morning," she said, her voice light and easy. I forced a smile. "Morning." She didn't seem different at all. If anything, she looked relaxed, happy, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't said what she said. I wanted to ask her right then and there, to get it over with, but the words stuck in my throat. I needed more time to figure out what to say and how to say it. But every second I spent not talking about it felt like I was suffocating. Throughout the day, I caught myself watching her, analyzing every little thing she did. Was she texting someone? Did she seem distant? Was she hiding something? Honestly, I felt paranoid, like I was losing my mind. But how could I not? Hearing your wife say you were her last choice messes with you in ways you don't expect. At one point, I even thought about talking to one of my friends about it, but I felt too embarrassed. What would I even say? Hey, I overheard my wife say I was her last resort. What should I do? It sounded ridiculous, like something out of a bad drama. Plus, I didn't want to paint Emma in a bad light to my friends if this turned out to be something we could work through. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't just brush this under the rug. This was too big to ignore. By the time evening rolled around, I had made up my mind. I had to bring it up, no matter how hard it was. I couldn't live with this gnawing at me. So after dinner, I casually said, "Hey, we should talk later." Emma looked at me, a bit surprised, but just nodded. All right. Little did she know that conversation would change everything. After overhearing Emma say I was her last resort, my mind had been racing. I couldn't shake the words, no matter how much I tried to convince myself that maybe it wasn't as bad as it sounded. The next day, everything felt different. I started noticing little things I hadn't really paid attention to before, or maybe I just didn't want to see them. Emma was acting off. She still smiled. She still said all the right things, but there was something about the way she carried herself. Like she was trying a little too hard to act normal. Or maybe I was just imagining it because of what I had heard. Either way, the tension was there, even if neither of us said anything about it. That morning, as we were having breakfast, I couldn't help but steal glances at her. She was scrolling through her phone like she usually did, but every now and then, I caught her typing quickly, then deleting and retyping. I don't know why, but it made me feel uneasy. "Who are you texting?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. She looked up almost startled, like she didn't expect me to notice. "Oh, just a friend," she said, her voice a little too light, too casual. "You don't know her." Then she went right back to her phone. That wasn't unusual, but now everything felt suspicious. I didn't press her, though. I just nodded and pretended like it didn't bother me. But it did. Throughout the day, I kept replaying her words from the night before. Was she texting the same friend she was talking to on the phone? Or was it someone else? My mind was coming up with 1,000 scenarios, none of them good. I kept thinking, what if she's hiding something? What if there's more to this than just her feeling like she settled for me? Later that afternoon, I caught her again on her phone. This time, she was smiling at the screen. It wasn't the kind of smile you give when you're texting a friend about something funny. It was more intimate, soft, almost affectionate. I couldn't help myself. "What's so funny?" She looked up quickly, her fingers locking the screen with one swift motion. "Oh, nothing," she said, brushing it off. "Just a meme." But there was something about the way she said it, like she was trying to keep me from digging any deeper. That's when the doubt really started creeping in. Was there someone else? Was she still talking to an ex or someone from her past? I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband who questions every little thing. But after what I heard, I couldn't help it. Every little action felt like a clue to a bigger secret. The weirdest part was how normal Emma was acting otherwise, like nothing had changed. We still went about our day, running errands, making dinner, watching TV together. But there was this unspoken tension between us. At least, I felt it. I didn't know if she did, or if she was just that good at pretending. At one point, we were sitting on the couch, watching some random show, and she leaned over, resting her head on my shoulder. It felt nice, but it also felt wrong. How could she be so affectionate after what she said? Did she even mean it? Or was this her way of pretending everything was fine? I almost said something right then and there. The words were at the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't get them out. What if I was blowing this out of proportion? What if I misunderstood her conversation? I wanted to believe that. I really did. But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, I kept going back to that one sentence. Donald was my last resort. It wasn't just about the words, it was the way she said them. There was no hesitation, no hint of a joke. It sounded like something she genuinely believed. And that's what hurt the most. By the end of the day, I was mentally exhausted. I couldn't keep living like this, second-guessing everything she said and did. I knew I had to confront her, but I needed to find the right moment. The problem was, every time I thought about bringing it up, I felt this knot in my stomach. What if the conversation goes worse than I expect? What if she confirms all my worst fears? As we got ready for bed, Emma seemed completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. She kissed me goodnight and rolled over, falling asleep almost instantly. Meanwhile, I lay there, wide awake, my mind racing with a million thoughts. I started thinking back to all the moments in our relationship where I might have missed signs. Were there times when she seemed distant, but I brushed it off as her having a bad day? Were there moments when she hinted at being unhappy, but I was too blind to see it? And then there was the nagging thought, the one that made my stomach churn. What if she was comparing me to someone else? Someone she thought was better? The idea of being someone's backup plan, the person they settled for because they couldn't have what they really wanted, made me feel sick. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours, trying to figure out my next move. After a few days of feeling like my head was about to explode from all the overthinking, I finally decided I couldn't take it anymore. I had to talk to Emma. I mean, how do you just sit on something like that, knowing your wife sees you as a last resort? It was eating me alive, and I knew if I didn't bring it up, I'd probably go insane. That morning, we were both home. I tried to keep things as normal as possible, even though my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. We had breakfast together, but I couldn't taste a damn thing. I just kept staring at her, trying to figure out how to start the conversation. Every time I opened my mouth to say something, I chickened out. Finally, after we finished eating, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I took a deep breath and said, "Hey, Emma, we need to talk." She looked up from her phone, a little surprised, but didn't say anything. I motioned for us to sit in the living room. We sat down on the couch, and the tension in the air was so thick it felt suffocating. Emma looked at me, her face a mix of curiosity and concern. I could tell she was trying to figure out what was coming. "Okay," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." She nodded, still quiet. I took another deep breath, and then just went for it. "A few nights ago, I overheard you on the phone with your friend. You said something about settling for me, that I was your last resort." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. It was like time had frozen, and I was just sitting there, waiting for the world's worst news to drop. Finally, she let out a nervous laugh, the kind you do when you're caught off guard. Wait, you heard that? She asked, her voice shaky. Yeah, I said, trying to keep my cool. I heard everything. She looked down at her hands, fiddling with her fingers. Donald, I didn't mean it like that. I was just talking with my friend. It was a stupid thing to say. Stupid? I repeated, feeling the frustration build. Emma, you said I was your last resort. That's not just stupid. That's crushing. She sighed, rubbing her temples like she was trying to think of the right words. I was venting, okay? It wasn't serious. Sometimes you just say things in the heat of the moment, and they don't mean anything. Don't mean anything? I shot back. Emma, those words don't come out of nowhere. You don't just casually tell someone you settled for your husband unless there's some truth behind it. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and frustration. It's not like that, Donald. I was talking about how everyone feels pressured to get married, to settle down. I was just, I don't know, venting about life. I shook my head. But why say that? About me? About us? If you were just venting, you could have said anything else. Why did it have to be about settling for me? Emma's lips trembled slightly, and I could see tears welling in her eyes. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I love you, Donald. I really do. I was just feeling stressed, and it came out wrong. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something about the whole thing felt off, like there was more she wasn't telling me. I swallowed hard. Emma, I need to know. Do you really feel like you settled for me? Like I was your last resort? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down again, avoiding my eyes. The silence was deafening, and every second that passed felt like an eternity. Finally, she whispered, I don't know. You don't know? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. What does that even mean? She let out a shaky breath. It means I don't know how I feel sometimes, she said, her voice trembling. I love you, but sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. Not because of you, but because of me. I'm scared I rushed into this too fast, and now, I don't know how to fix it. I leaned back on the couch, trying to process everything. Part of me was angry, but another part just felt sad. Emma, I get that you're scared, I said, my voice tight. But what about me? Do you think this isn't terrifying for me too? Do you think I want to be sitting here wondering if my wife even wants to be with me? She wiped her eyes, shaking her head. That's not what I meant. I never wanted to hurt you, Donald. I swear. I thought getting married would give me clarity, but instead, it's made me realize how unsure I really am. Her words hit like a gut punch, and I had to force myself to swallow the lump forming in my throat. So what are you saying? That you regret marrying me? Emma hesitated, biting her lip like she was afraid of her own answer. No, it's not like that. I love you. I do. But I don't know if I love you the way I'm supposed to. I let out a hollow laugh, shaking my head. The way you're supposed to? What does that even mean, Emma? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're telling me I was just a convenient choice, not the person you actually wanted. Her eyes widened, and she quickly shook her head. No, that's not it. She insisted. I just feel like I rushed into this. Like I didn't stop to think about what I really wanted, and now I don't know how to fix it. I rubbed my hands over my face, exhaling slowly. So what now? I asked, barely able to get the words out. What are we supposed to do with this, Emma? She sniffled, her hands gripping the hem of her sweater. I don't know, she whispered. Of course you don't, I muttered under my breath, shaking my head. I leaned forward, staring at her, desperate for something. Anything that didn't leave me feeling like I was dangling over the edge of a cliff. Emma, do you even want to be in this marriage? Because right now, it feels like you've already checked out. She bit her lip again, her gaze darting away from mine. Donald, I don't want to hurt you, she said softly, but I feel so confused. I thought getting married would make things clearer, but it's only made me realize how unsure I am. My chest tightened, and I clenched my fists to keep from slamming them against the couch in frustration. So what are you saying? I asked again, more forcefully this time. Do you want out? Emma looked at me then, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt, sadness, fear. I don't know, she whispered. I felt like I was going in circles, like no matter what I said, I was going to get the same useless answer. You need time, I muttered bitterly. That's always the go-to, isn't it? Time. I let out a shaky breath, my hands tightening into fists. But time isn't going to fix this, Emma. We're either in this together, or we're not. Sitting around waiting isn't going to magically make things better. She looked down, blinking back tears. I don't know what you want me to say, Donald, she said, her voice breaking. I'm scared. I don't want to make the wrong decision. What about me? I demanded, my voice raw with frustration. Do you think this is easy for me? I'm sitting here questioning everything about our relationship, wondering if you ever really loved me, or if I was just the guy you settled for because you didn't want to be alone. Emma's head snapped up, her eyes flashing with emotion. That's not fair, she said, shaking her head. I do love you, Donald. I'm scared. I rushed into this. My chest tightened at her words, the weight of them sinking in. Then why didn't you say something before we got married? I asked, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. You had every chance to call it off if you weren't sure. She hesitated, her fingers gripping the hem of her sweater. Because I thought I could make it work, she admitted quietly. I didn't want to disappoint you. I didn't want to be alone. There it was. The truth I had been dreading, but half expected. She had stayed with me out of fear, not love. The realization cut deeper than I thought it would, leaving me feeling hollow. I looked away, my mind racing, trying to process what this meant for us. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I didn't know what to say anymore. What do you say to someone who's basically just admitted they're not sure if they want to be with you? Finally, Emma spoke, her voice hesitant. Maybe we need some space, she suggested. Just for a little while, to think things through. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Space. I repeated, shaking my head. Emma, we've been living in the same house, but we've already been worlds apart for days now. What difference would more space make? She didn't have an answer for that, and honestly, neither did I. We were stuck in this weird limbo, and it was tearing us both apart. That night, we slept in the same bed, but it felt like we were miles away from each other. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every moment that had led us here. How did we get to this point? I wondered. Was there any way to fix this, or was this the beginning of the end? No matter what we decided, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay stuck in this limbo forever. Emma's indecision, her I don't know about our marriage, was like a slow poison. It was eating away at me, and if I didn't do something soon, it was going to destroy me. I needed to take control of my own life, even if that meant walking away from the person I thought I'd spend forever with. The next morning, I woke up feeling more determined than I had in days. Emma was still asleep, curled up on her side of the bed, looking peaceful, like none of this was weighing on her as much as it was on me. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe she had already mentally checked out, and I was the one left holding on to something that wasn't there anymore. I got up quietly and went to the living room. Sitting there in the dim morning light, I started thinking about what my life would look like without Emma. The thought scared me. Of course, it did. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had been living in fear for too long. Fear of losing her. Fear of being alone. Fear of starting over. But maybe, just maybe, being alone was better than being someone's last resort. I spent the day gathering my thoughts, figuring out what I wanted to say to her. I wasn't going to let this drag on any longer. It was time for us to have a real conversation, one that wasn't filled with half-truths and I don't knows. That evening, after dinner, I sat her down. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice calm and firm. Emma, we need to talk. She looked up at me, her face serious. Okay. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, about everything that's happened, and I can't keep living like this. I need to know if we're going to fix this or if it's time to move on. Emma looked down, her fingers fiddling with the edge of her sweater. I've been thinking too, she said softly. And I don't think I can give you the answer you're looking for. I nodded. I had expected that response, but it still stung. Of course, she couldn't give me an answer. She never could. Then I think it's best if we go our separate ways, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I love you, Emma, but I can't be in a marriage where I'm not someone's first choice. I deserve more than that. She started to cry, and for a moment, I felt like a complete a-hole. But I knew this was the right decision. Staying together out of fear or guilt wasn't fair to either of us. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered through her tears. I know, I said gently, and I don't want to hurt you either. But sometimes, the best thing we can do is let go. We sat there in silence for a long time, both of us trying to process what was happening. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. But this was my life, and I had to own it. The next few days were rough. We started the process of separating, figuring out who would keep what, and how we were going to handle the logistics of splitting up. It was awkward and painful, but also necessary. Every step we took towards separating felt like another weight being lifted off my shoulders, even though it hurt like hell. One night, as I was packing up some of my things, Emma came into the room, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. Donald, she said quietly, her voice soft but firm. I hope you find someone who makes you happy. Someone who can be everything you need. I looked at her, my chest tightening. There was no anger between us, no resentment, just the quiet acceptance that what we had was over. I hope you find that too, I said. And that was it. No dramatic goodbyes. No long speeches. Just two people realizing that sometimes, love isn't enough, and it's okay to let go. After Emma moved out, I focused on myself. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in a while, threw myself into work, and started figuring out who I was outside of my marriage. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I missed her so much it physically hurt. But I knew I was doing the right thing. One night, a few weeks after she left, I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through my phone, when I stumbled across an old photo of us. We looked so happy, so in love. For a moment, I felt a pang of regret, wondering if there was something more I could have done to save us. But then I remembered everything we'd been through, all the pain, all the confusion, and I realized that sometimes the best thing you can do is let go. I'm not saying I have it all figured out now. I'm still healing, still trying to understand what comes next. But for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. I know I deserve to be with someone who sees me as their first choice, someone who loves me without hesitation or doubt. And I'm willing to wait for that. Moving forward isn't easy, but it's necessary, and I'm ready to take that step. It's been about a month since Emma and I decided to split. The divorce was filed, and we had signed the agreements, and now, there was no turning back from this. It hasn't been easy, but I've been doing my best to move on. I focused on work, caught up with friends, and tried to find some sense of normalcy in the mess of it all. I thought I was making progress. I really did. I was starting to feel like myself again. But then life decided to throw another punch at me. One day, I was hanging out with my buddy Matt. We were catching up, talking about random stuff over drinks, when he casually dropped a bomb on me. "Hey," he said, swirling the ice in his glass. "Did you know Emma's dating someone?" I nearly choked on my drink. "Wait, what? Already?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Matt shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Yeah, I saw her at a coffee shop the other day. She was with this guy. They looked close." My heart sank. I mean, I knew we were over, but hearing that she was already seeing someone else hit me harder than I expected. The paperwork was just finalized, the divorce decree was still pending, and here she was, moving on like it was nothing. I tried to play it cool, acting like it didn't bother me. I leaned back in my chair, swirling my drink in my hand as if this was just casual conversation. "Do you know who the guy is?" I asked, keeping my tone light. Matt hesitated for a second, glancing away before answering. "I think it's that guy she used to talk about before you two got married. You know, the one she had some history with." And just like that, everything clicked. The constant texting, the weird behavior, her being glued to her phone during those last few weeks. It wasn't just her being distant. It was him. She had been talking to this guy the whole time, even before we decided to split. I didn't say much after that. I just nodded and changed the subject, pretending like it didn't matter. But inside, I was fuming. It wasn't the fact that she was dating someone. That was her choice. It was the timing. It felt like our entire marriage had been a joke to her, like she had one foot out the door long before we even said our goodbyes. Later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I replayed every moment of our last month together. Every time she was on her phone, every time she brushed off my questions, every time she avoided eye contact. It all made sense now. She hadn't just been distant. She had checked out, already focused on someone else. The next morning, I decided I needed answers. Not because I wanted to get back together or because I thought confronting her would change anything, but because I needed closure. I needed to hear it from her, to understand why she couldn't just be honest with me from the start. I sent her a message. "Can we talk?" She agreed, and we met later that day at a park. It was strange seeing her again, especially knowing what I knew now. She looked nervous, like she knew what was coming. "Emma," I started, keeping my voice as calm as I could. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." She nodded, but didn't say a word. I took a breath. "I heard you've been seeing someone." I watched her closely, waiting for her reaction. "Is it true?" Her eyes widened for a split second before she looked away. "Yeah," she admitted quietly. "I've been seeing someone." I already knew the answer, but I had to hear it from her. "Is it the same guy you were talking to before we separated?" She hesitated, her fingers twisting together in her lap. Then, finally, she nodded. "Yes, it's him." I felt a mix of anger and sadness settle in my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. My voice was tight when I spoke. "So, you've been talking to him this whole time? Even when we were still trying to figure things out? So, you were cheating on me?" Emma looked down, guilt written all over her face. "I didn't plan for it to happen like this," she said softly. "We started talking again, and it felt right." "Right?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "Emma, we were still married. We were supposed to be working on us, and you were already moving on with someone else." "I know," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry, Donald. I didn't mean to hurt you." Hearing her apologize didn't make me feel any better. In fact, it just made me angrier. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my voice steady. "If you were cheating the whole time, why didn't you just tell me? Why drag this out?" Emma let out a shaky breath. "I didn't know how to. I was scared. I didn't want to hurt you more than I already had." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Well, congratulations," I said coldly. "You managed to do that anyway." We sat there in silence. I wanted to scream, to yell at her for being so selfish, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. The damage was done, and there was no going back. Finally, I stood up. I hope he's worth it, I said, my voice void of any warmth. Emma looked up at me, her eyes filled with something that almost looked like regret. Donald, I don't want to hear it. I cut her off, exhausted by the conversation. Let's just be done with this. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away. As I left, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I was finally done with Emma, but the pain of betrayal was still fresh. It would take time to heal, but at least now I knew the truth. Moving forward wasn't going to be easy, but at least I could do it without looking back. It's been a few weeks since I confronted Emma, and honestly, I thought I was done with all the drama. The divorce papers were still in process, but I had been keeping my distance from her and focusing on rebuilding my life. Things were slowly getting better. I was starting to feel more like myself, even if the whole situation still left a bad taste in my mouth. Then, one evening, I got a message from Emma. Just seeing her name pop up on my phone made my stomach twist. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. The message was short and vague. Can we talk? It's important. I rolled my eyes, thinking, what now? A big part of me wanted to ignore her, but another part, one that I wasn't proud of, was curious. What could she possibly want after everything? Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her the next day. We met at a small coffee shop, and the moment I walked in, I could tell something was wrong. Emma looked like a wreck. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she hadn't slept or stopped crying in days. She was fidgeting, barely able to look me in the eye. I didn't feel sympathy. All I could think about was how much she had hurt me, and how I wasn't going to let her back into my life. Donald, she started, her voice shaky. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to tell you something. I folded my arms, leaning back in my chair. What is it, Emma? She took a deep breath, tears already welling up in her eyes. The guy I was seeing. She hesitated, then swallowed hard. He was cheating on me. He was seeing another girl the whole time we were together. I blinked, caught off guard. That wasn't what I had expected. I didn't say anything, just let her keep talking. I found out a few days ago, she continued, her voice breaking. I confronted him, and he admitted it. He didn't even try to deny it. Her lips trembled as she shook her head. I feel so stupid, Donald. I left you in for what? For someone who didn't even care about me. She started crying, covering her face with her hands. I sat there, watching her break down, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and indifference. This was karma, plain and simple. She had betrayed me for a guy who turned out to be a player, and now she was reaping what she had sown. I watched as she sobbed, her shoulders shaking. I'm so sorry, she choked out between tears. I made such a huge mistake. I thought I wanted something else, but I see now how wrong I was. She wiped her face, sniffing. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I had to tell you. I let a moment pass, watching her cry. Part of me wanted to say something cruel, to make her feel the kind of pain I had felt, but I was past that. Instead, I just sighed. Emma, I appreciate you telling me the truth, but it doesn't change anything. She looked up, her red-rimmed eyes filled with desperation. Donald, I know I messed up, she pleaded. But can't we at least try to fix things? I still love you. I realize now that you were the best thing that ever happened to me. I shook my head. Emma, you didn't love me, I said, my voice calm but firm. You loved the idea of not being alone. And when things got tough, you ran to someone else. I met her gaze, making sure she understood. I can't be with someone who only comes back when things don't work out with someone else. She reached across the table, trying to grab my hand, but I pulled away before she could. Please, Donald, she whispered, her voice breaking. Give me another chance. I'll do anything to make it right. I stood up, my decision already made. Emma, it's too late. I've moved on, and you need to do the same. I took a breath, steadying myself. I deserve someone who chooses me first, not someone who settles or comes crawling back when things go wrong. Her face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks, but I didn't feel sorry for her. This was her mess, not mine. I'm sorry, Emma, I said softer this time. But we're done. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving her there in tears. As I stepped outside, I inhaled deeply, feeling lighter than I had in months. It was as if a weight had finally been lifted off my shoulders. Emma's betrayal had been a painful chapter in my life, but now it was finally closed. I was ready to move forward for real. Emma tried everything to stop the divorce. She showed up at the courthouse looking desperate, her eyes red and swollen from crying. When my lawyer presented the case, making it clear that she was the one who had initially filed for divorce, she looked at me, pleading. Donald, please, she said, her voice shaking. I made a mistake. I don't want this anymore. My lawyer didn't even blink. Your Honor, the petitioner in this case is Mrs. Emma Turner. She filed for divorce and requested dissolution of the marriage. My client merely agreed to her terms. The judge nodded. Mrs. Turner, you initiated this process. Are you now saying you wish to withdraw your petition? Yes, Your Honor, she said quickly, her hands clasped together like she was praying. I wasn't thinking clearly. I want to fix things. The judge sighed, flipping through the case file. The court does not take marriage lightly, but it also does not entertain frivolous back-and-forth decisions. The divorce proceedings will continue as originally filed. Emma's face crumpled as the judge's words hit her. She turned to me, her expression pleading. Donald, please, she whispered. I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. Then came the next bombshell. A week after her failed attempt to stop the divorce, Emma suddenly demanded alimony. I just left my job, she argued. I have no financial stability. I need support. This time, even the judge looked irritated. He adjusted his glasses and looked at her over the rim. Mrs. Turner, I see here that in your original divorce petition, you explicitly stated that you did not require any financial settlement or spousal support. He glanced at her attorney, who remained silent. You cannot simply change your mind when it suits you. Emma swallowed hard, her face pale. I wasn't thinking. Regardless, we will proceed with the agreement as it was originally filed, the judge stated firmly. Emma looked like she wanted to argue, but she knew it was useless. Then the final truth came out. She was pregnant. Not with my child, of course. The father was her lover, the same man she had left me for, the same man who had cheated on her. It all made sense now. Emma had resigned from her job because she had planned to marry him, to move in with him, to start a new life. But that life had crumbled before it even began. Now, she was alone. No husband, no lover, no job, and a child on the way. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt no sympathy, no pity. Karma is a bitch. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.